Hello and welcome to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar. In this video we'll be concentrating on the overarching themes and ideas as conveyed across the poem The Ruined Maid by Thomas Hardy. Hardy was a realist who set out to critique Victorian society. He was disenfranchised by the division between rich and poor and sought to show it in every way he could across his creative works. You may know him as a novelist and a poet, but his original trade was an architect. It gave him an interesting vantage point on the world around him and really flagged to him all that was wrong about Victorian society. Another interesting facet to our man Hardy was his unusual relationships with women. When his first wife Emma died in December of 1912, his grief really struck him hard, yet he still decided to remarry so soon. By 1914 he'd married his secretary Florence, who was 39 years younger than him. And to my mind, he actually still was in love with his first wife. He concentrated on writing poems about her and even was buried with her when he died. Interestingly enough though, when he decided how he would die, his legacy looked interesting. He was buried without his heart, so he could be buried with his wife, his first wife that is, and his parents. Yet his body was buried in Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey. That decision to still be buried with his parents and his first wife, I think, really accentuates how she was the love of his life. The interest of Hardy across this poem and others in the collection that they come from is presenting the problems of Victorian society and the judgment of women. And in this poem, it's a conversation between two women. There is a ruined maid who has become a man's mistress, and she seems quite content with her decision, especially when she meets a woman who is from her local area and where she came from, who seems to be suffering upon hard times. For the ruined maid, Hardy gives her informal, standard English. Yet for the other woman, he uses broken dialect to amplify the division between the two of them. Whilst this poem takes on the real issues of the day in Victorian times, it's thought that Hardy actually still intended to make it light-hearted, to really galvanise and hammer home his message that this division between women and the judgment they have been faced with is wrong for each of them. So, the ruined maid. The word ruined simply means spoilt or tainted. The fact this appears in the title resonates with this idea that we are judging a woman. Once more, the word maid has connotations of virginity. It's linked to an innocent young woman. The fact that this woman is ruined implies that her virginity is in question, and it focuses our mind as readers. Our interest is in how did she get ruined and why did this happen? I'm going to don an accent for this poem just so you really hear the dialect in a different way. Forgive me if it's not your favourite thing to hear. Oh, Melia, my dear, this does everything crown. Who could have supposed I should meet you in town? And whence such fair garments, such prosperity? Oh, didn't you know I'd been ruined? Said she. You left us in tatters without shoes and socks, tired of digging potatoes and spudding up docks, and now you've gay bracelets and bright feathers 3. Yes, that's how we dress when we're ruined, said she. At home in the Barton you'd say thee and thou and thiccoon and theosoon and thother, but now you're talking quite fits thee for high company. Some polish is gained with one's ruin, said she. Your hands were like paws then, your face blue and bleak, and now I'm bewitched by your delicate cheek, and your little gloves fits on any lady. We never do work when we're ruined, said she. You used to call home life a haggard and dream, and you'd sigh and you'd sock, but at present you seem to know not of megrims or melancholy. True, one's life pretty lively when ruined, said she. I wish I had feathers, a fine sweeping gown, and a delicate face, and could strut about town. My dear, a raw country girl such as you be cannot quite expect that. You ain't ruined, said she. From the opening of the first stanza, there's a superficial greeting. It implies intimacy between them, but actually we quickly learn that in this dramatic dialogue, speaker 1 and speaker 2 are not as close as we might think. The first speaker dominates across this poem, And I love the fact that our second speaker seems quite enigmatic. She may be the ruined maid, but she's mysterious for us, and we find that interesting as the reader. There's quite a forced propriety from the first speaker in the rhyming couplets that Hardy's placed them in. Crown and town. And it's almost as if our enigmatic second speaker is forced into rhyming too, and she doesn't like it. I don't think it really works as well. The judgments that are made by our first speaker when she comments on fair garments and such prosperity, it's judgmental on superficial change from the maid she knew to this ruined maid she sees before her. I think the fact this is a conversation amplifies their division, with each of them taking on the role of past and present impoverished woman. Now by stanza 2 it takes a different turn. These images of poverty rife in Victorian England look like tatters, not having shoes or socks, having to pick up the digging of potatoes and spudding up of docks. It sounds like a hard life at the grindstone. And the first speaker seems really aware of the transformation that the ruined maid has taken. And she's commenting quite a lot on the attire. And she's got fancy bracelets and beautiful feathers in her hair. I love, though, that the ruined maid is not apologetic. She's actually owning it. She's like, yeah, I do own really great clothes. Yes, that's how we dress when we're ruined, said she. The imagery, I think, that is embedded through the first speaker, though, helps to instill in us as readers what the past looked like. It helps us make sense of the decision as to why the ruined maid has chosen a life of not upholding society's values. Because to live in sin would at least free her from poverty. By stanza 3, if it wasn't already clear to us, the use of dialect with the first speaker really accentuates the eloquence of our second speaker, as shown through line 12, where they say, some polish is gained with one's ruin, said she. That's different from ficoon and thisoon and thother and thee and thou. It's so clear that no matter how confident the first speaker seemed in adopting airs and graces and seeming to be able to manage a conversation in standard English, actually they'd used up all of their earlier confidence and now they're going back to how they usually speak. A bit like if someone adopts a phone voice, often they'll drop it once they're more comfortable with who they're speaking to. I think the sounds of thicoon and thisoon and thother, or I think they echo the gloom of a life of poverty. And the use of the dialect really signals the struggles of impoverished life. Yet by contrast, our second speaker, they hold absolute elegance in speech and definitely a sarcastic tone with the words they're choosing to use. Some polish is gained with one's ruin, said she. Now that sounds like a juxtaposition, really. No, you can't gain polish by being ruined. Ruining something is making it look bad. Polish is associated with making something look good. But they're so much more confident in their way of speech. The fact they're speaking so clearly is almost the criminality of their division. Once more, though, by stanza 4, we have imagery again of the poverty that she's escaped from. Your hands were like paws. The simile there of the animal image, it signals to us just how brutal the life was. Her face was blue and bleak. The alliteration that goes alongside that. But now, speaker 1 is bewitched by her delicate cheek. So here we are witnessing a bit of almost jealousy latent throughout speaker 1 now. And your little gloves fit on any lady. Well, to me the verb bewitched adds something too. Both of these women are made into witches one way or another by society. I think this is hitting the nail on the head about what Hardy's agenda is here. It would seem that the mistress, the ruined maid, well, she's no more than a prostitute, some would say. She deserves to be condemned. Yet this working, impoverished woman, she can't speak properly. She's a farm worker. She's going to get judged by readers in that regard. It's almost as if they're both set up to fail. But the jealousy from speaker one and your little gloves fit on any lady, she wants a life better than this. The hyphenation, I think, of lady amplifies the pomposity, but it also sets up the rhyme scheme that is resisted quite confidently by this point from the second speaker. We never do work when we're ruined, said she. When we're talking about that, the repetitive inclusion of the pronoun we dislocates the two speakers. We don't do that. My question is that the royal we? Like you're some sort of very grandiose member of society? Or is there somebody genuinely struggling to get rid of an annoyance from their past who's just caught them on the street? By the time we move into the next stanzas, though, whatever we thought we knew is reevaluated. Once more, we see speaker one remind her of some home truths. You used to call home life a hag-ridden dream. The contrast of that poor past alongside its unhappiness, and you'd sigh and you'd sock, and then the contrast of now having no megrims of melancholy. It's a constant reminder that when you're stuck in poverty, it's hard to get out. But apparently it's not that hard to be happy when you're free from it. Now as readers we consider who has the harder life. Is it our first speaker, stuck in a very melancholic state now, living out that hag-ridden nightmare that speaker two endured? Or is it the woman who's had to be falling into prostitution or a man's mistress just to make a living of some kind? The comeback from speaker two is different in stanza 5. True, one's pretty lively when ruined, said she. By this point, the repetition of ruined intensifies the reality that Hardy is definitely being ironic. You wouldn't refer to yourself in those terms if you were that ashamed of what you've been doing. She's not ashamed, she's owning it. Yeah, we're pretty lively when we're ruined. At this stage in the poem, the mysterious second speaker, I don't think would genuinely confide in the first speaker anyway, if they genuinely were worried about the way the world perceived them. And I think that's what makes things increasingly fraught in their conversation. The distinction between speaker one, who frankly wants to remind her of where she's come from and maybe judge her some more for how she's chosen to live her life, makes our mysterious second speaker become quite defensive in an interesting way. By the final stanza though, speaker one wants the life of speaker two. I wish I had feathers, a fine sweeping gown, and a delicate face and could strut about town. That dream of a life of luxury is potentially being a bit brutish about speaker two. The verb strut seems quite negative. Yet the comeback of speaker two is something to behold. They are definitely sarcastic. My dear, a raw country girl such as you be cannot quite expect that. You ain't ruined. Once more, the use of the words my dear really exemplifies the division between the two women. The absolute finality of the full stop in the middle of that final line of the poem breaks the rhythm of the poem and the mood that follows it. A raw country girl such as you be cannot quite expect that. It's almost a caesura in tow. You ain't ruined, said she. It's just like, listen, that is our division. We are different. You aren't ruined like me. The overriding thought for me, though, is both these women and their lives are tragic. There's no walking away from it. And the structure adds to fueling our understanding of how tragic both their lives are. Across this dramatic dialogue, the rhyme scheme mirrors what we would hear as almost a nursery rhyme if we weren't listening to the words closely. The AABB rhyme scheme would be what we wanted to hear as a lullaby. But instead, across these 6 quatrains and this rhyme scheme, the exact rhymes present a lovely juxtaposition to what the words are. It might sound light-hearted, and its nursery rhyme qualities simply exacerbate the idea this is a living nightmare. This is ironic, in fact, that our main character is a prostitute, falling into a life where she's actually trapped too. And both these women and their ever-tragic existences have no hope of being viewed kindly by Victorian society. One way or another, they are both condemned. The success that Hardy proves again and again across his poems is forcing the reader to take a step back and judge themselves for a second and what they choose to judge of society. The success is also just once again emphasising the division between rich and poor, a success across many poems in his works.